So for those of you who haven't been here before, my name's Stacey and I've worked for the past 20 years in fundraising, most of that in trusts and foundations. I have worked for large national charities and small community charities, getting some of those bread and butter grants from the smaller organisations and some of those large six-figure grants as well. So hopefully I'll be able to help you with any questions that you have today. The event's being run by Tree Fundraising, and for those who don't know us, we're a consultant agency that help organisations like yours with anything to do with high value fundraising, so trust and grants, capital appeals and major donors. And there's lots of information on our website if you want to find out more, or we can have a little chat about what we do as well. So how are you all? How are you all feeling? Last month when we had our Q&A, everyone was feeling really optimistic. So I hope that's continued on and everyone's feeling good and feeling in a better place than maybe we were at the beginning of the year. When I was running these kind of January, February, March time, everyone was feeling a bit low and a bit deflated about the sector, particularly in trust fundraising, as everything felt a little doom and gloom. But I'm hoping now that you're all still feeling really positive. Have you had any good wins? Anything you want to celebrate that we could all celebrate, or anything that we maybe can all help with? If you've got any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat now as well, and we can try and answer those. And if there's anything anybody else wants to contribute to any of the answers that I give, or you've got any insights to anything, that would be really, really handy. So to pop them either in the chat or in the Q&A, whichever suits you best. Or if you want to come on camera, then you can pop your hand up and you can put your video on and ask any questions that you have. So how are you all feeling out there? How's it feeling now at the minute? Things, like I said, things seem to be feeling a little bit more positive. We're still getting lots of trust and grants that are closing. But I think it seems to have slowed down a little bit. But I will say, after working in the sector for 20 years last month actually, we do have bits like this where it feels like everything is going against us, and trust fundraising is really, really hard. We had, I'm trying to think things that happened. COVID was actually quite positive for trust and grants, because a lot of trust and grants had extra money to give away and could see what was happening and wanted to help particularly grassroots community organisations on the front line to kind of establish themselves or get going. So there seemed to be lots of grant money available in COVID, but the tsunami, when that happened, a lot of trust and grants pivoted to helping overseas. When the war in Ukraine started, again, lots of the funding kind of pivoted to help those things that are kind of overseas, and the money that was there for kind of UK based organisations like some of yours just wasn't there. So we do go through these peaks and troughs. I haven't seen it where so many organisations at once are looking at their kind of priorities and looking at what they want to do next and pausing. I always think, you know, as a charity, if we closed our doors and didn't do what we were doing, and paused to have a rebrand or pause to have a look at our priorities, you know, what we were doing, our beneficiaries, who we were helping, we just wouldn't be able to do it, would we? We wouldn't be able to start doing what we were doing while we, you know, had a relook and a review of everything that we were doing. But lots of grant makers seem to be doing that at the moment. Well, so Bobby says, I undertook a quick analysis of our qualified mid-level trust, and 80% had either increased or maintained income. So a mixed picture amongst closures, pauses, reviews, etc. But that's really positive, isn't it, that you've been able to increase or maintain about 80% of your qualified mid-level trust. That's actually really positive and kind of gives a feel for maybe not so much the doom and gloom that's happening out there. Don't get me wrong, it's really, really hard at the minute. It's really hard to be a trust fundraiser at the minute, and you're all doing an amazing job, absolutely. But I think sometimes when all we see is the closures and the kind of, oh, this is bad, isn't it? That's another one closed, or another one paused, or another one reviewing or changing. It can make us feel quite stressed, and can make us feel like that is what's going on in the sector. But actually, although that's going on, there's lots of good things, like Bobby says here, that sort of makes it a mixed picture that's not always so doom and gloom. But you know what, it's like the press, isn't it? the press will only kind of focus on the doom and gloom aspect of something because it makes a better story. So sometimes that happens in trust and fundraising too. But it's definitely slowing down, I would say, from what I've seen. And the trust out there that are still giving amazing amounts of money and still want to work. And I think what's the biggest shift that I've seen in trust fundraising in 20 years since I've worked in the sector is that building relationships with trust is something that you have to do now. When I first started, you used to go through the trust administrator. That used to be someone working in a solicitor's office. And you wouldn't be able to speak to anybody in the trust, and the trust administrator might not know that much that's going on about the trust and weren't really interested in talking to you. That seems to have really pivoted now, and trusts are welcoming you to get in touch where they have the capacity. And building those relationships and looking at ways to interact differently with trusts, going along to a webinar, going along to a Q&A that they might be speaking at, and kind of getting your questions and getting your name out there is a thing that lots of people are starting to notice and starting to do now. So building those relationships with trusts has become kind of part and parcel of just making an application. It's become a little bit more like a major donor relationship, where you take them through the 7 stages of stewardship, and you'd kind of do more than just make an ask. That's what it used to be like kind of 20 years ago. You'd make the ask, you'd send your update report, and then you'd make another ask. But there's all the nuances kind of in between those steps now that didn't really exist 20 years ago. Which is good. I think it's a good change because it means that you're building potentially longer term relationships with trusts, and you can really get them to understand your project, which increases your chances of being able to get long-term funding, multi-year funding. And also when something goes wrong, as it inevitably does, our projects change, our outputs don't always hit what we thought they were going to do, because you're kind of sometimes guessing if you haven't done your project before. You have a better relationship with them to be able to go back and go, things didn't quite go to plan, but here's all the amazing things that we did manage to achieve. So Sarah's asked, I'm aware that this has been asked quite a few times on various forums, but are there any magical tips for getting into trusts and foundations that don't accept unsolicited? I try sending brief introductory information and the odd impact report, but never hear anything back. I know often people suggest finding connections via trustees, but if there aren't any, is there anything else worth trying? Absolutely. There's lots of different things that we could do. Obviously, if a trust says they don't accept unsolicited applications, we shouldn't make contact with them unless they say that they'll accept an expression of interest. The best way is, unfortunately, to find a warm connection through your trustee. So that is always the first place that I check. If that's not possible, the other way that you can have a look is to go via LinkedIn. LinkedIn is becoming a great tool for trusts and foundations. Trusts and foundations themselves are using it more often to give updates about what they're up to, projects that they've supported. And you can use that as a gentle way in. So follow the foundation or the trust on LinkedIn. You can start, going, this is an amazing project. I'm so glad that it's being supported, and start getting your name known and out there in that way. Again, attend webinars, attend Q&As. Again, get your name out there. It might not be about you making a physical ask to a trust. It might be that you're kind of planting the seeds that they'll be able to find you. If you're doing great things in a sector that they're really interested in and you tick all their priorities, then you need to start laying those seeds and laying those layers that they can find what you're doing. So make sure your website is up to date, and that it shows impact and it shows the need. Sometimes we're not very good at putting on our websites what we need, what we financially need. We're not very good at making that visible for people to find. We're very good about saying, here's where we are and here's what we do. But we don't often say, and then we need X, Y, and Z to be able to continue this and do this. So make sure that messaging is out there. Make sure the same thing goes on your social media, that you're showing the impact and you're showing the need for support. So if organisations are out there trusts and foundations are out there looking for people that they want to support in their particular sectors, and what their priority is, you are demonstrating that you're out there doing really good things in that sector. Make sure that you use the funder's language on your website and in your social media. So if there are keywords that the funder uses to describe what they're doing and what they're supporting, make sure you reflect that in your language. So if they're doing keyword searches, your charity will pop up as someone who's doing really great things in something they're really interested in. If you can join any panels that talk and kind of in your industry and your specialism, if you can join panels that talk about it that the funders might be attending or might be listening to or might be interested in, if you can look at awards that work in your particular sector. So it's not always about the charity awards that we can go after, because as we discovered in last month's Q&A, there aren't many trust fundraising awards even in our own sector. But, if there are awards that you can go after, if you're doing amazing things with children, with older people, are there awards that you can go after that, again, elevate what you're doing and put yourself in the position that a funder is going to find you? Because after all, if you can't submit an unsolicited application, it's all about making your charity and your work as visible as possible so you can be found, because you want to be able to do amazing things to show that you're doing amazing things in the sector. There's no simple answer. If they say unsolicited, then that does close the door in one way, but there's lots of ways that you can get yourself seen. Unless you get a grant from one of them, you're never going to be sure if it has worked for you or not worked for you. But the idea is that you're trying to put as much out there. Like we said, plant those seeds, put yourself out there, talk their language, use their language, reflect it back in the wording that you're using on your website, in your social media. Look for those panels that you can join, look for those webinars and Q&As that you can go along to with that funder, and get your name, get your charity name known and out there. There's no easy way, because the reason they do it is they haven't got the capacity to be able to sift through all the applications that they're getting in many cases, so they don't accept unsolicited applications. So even sending an introductory or an impact report is often not going to get you through the door. It's those warm connections, as everybody always says. It's the old adage, but it is really true. Warm connections. Look at LinkedIn. Look if you're connected to anybody that way. Make your comments on the foundation or the trust LinkedIn. Make sure your language is reflective. Look for those industry places that you can kind of elevate what you're doing, and just keep shouting about what you're doing, really. And making sure that you're visible is the only real things that you can do to get yourself out there if it's unsolicited, because kind of sending things to them if they've asked for no unsolicited applications, even introductory things, often don't get looked at. The only exception, like I said, is if they say that they accept expression of interests, and then it's always worth popping an expression of interest in if you think you hit their priorities really, really well. So I hope that helps. It's a really hard one, and everybody, like Sarah says, everybody always wants to know, how do we get in with trusts that don't accept unsolicited applications? Because in my experience, they're always the ones that seem to fit you the best, and then they don't want you to speak to them. So those are my tips, and I hope they help. But if anybody else has got any tips that they want to share as well, pop them in. If anybody's had any really good success with people who have said no unsolicited applications. The other thing to look at as well is to look at the Ludlow Gateway, because on there's 250 plus trusts that you can apply to. You can either find trusts yourself and do like we normally would do with a trust, and match everything up and make sure your priorities and their priorities align, and get everything and apply just to that one trust, which I would absolutely suggest doing if you're a really good fit. Otherwise, you can put in a more general application, and that then gets sent to all of the trusts, and then they can choose to have a look at it or not to have a look at it. But at least you've got something out there that might get to some of those Ludlow trusts that are looked after by Ludlow. Will potentially get you in front of an unsolicited that way. I had some success with that probably 12 months ago, and I'd put a general one on, and it was a trust that didn't allow unsolicited applications, that eventually gave us a donation off the back of one of the general ones that were there. So that's another good way to do it as well. And the good thing about that is you can go back in and you can refresh your appeals, you can add new appeals, you can take appeals off when they finished. And I'd suggest doing that every 6 months. Go in and have a look and see what you need to refresh and what you need to remove. But always make sure you've got something on there that's a bit more general, that can go to any of the 250 plus trusts that they now look after. Bobby, are there people in other departments, functions in your charity who have relationships with funders? Are you looking at mapping relationships as 6 to 10 people are involved with purchasing funding decisions? Absolutely. So it's not always about just your trustees. If you're working with a program of mentors, is that some of your mentors, do they know any of the founders of trusts or trustees of trusts? Is there anyone else within your organisation you can map? And again, LinkedIn is a really good way to do that relationship mapping. If you're not able to get everybody in a room and do one of the maps on the wall, if you're a large organisation, having a look at how you're connected to some of these people and whether there's any mutual connections via LinkedIn, that then you can then go to those individuals and say, oh, I see you know such and such, who knows such and such, and there might be a warmer way in there as well. So absolutely, it's not always just about your trustees, as Bobby really helpfully points out. It can be about looking at your wider organisation, even your volunteers. Who do your volunteers potentially know? So make sure your LinkedIn is up to date and you're connected with everybody that you need to be connected with, because then that will show you how you're connected to everybody else. It's becoming a great tool to use. I mean, I've always used it when I've done my major donor work. But for trusts and foundations, I'm finding it's becoming even more important to be able to find those connections, and just to keep on top of what trusts and foundations are doing. They seem to be using LinkedIn more as well. So I would definitely say that that's a bit of an underutilized tool, a little bit of a secret tool, so don't tell everybody, that I would suggest having a look in. And again, make sure that your charity has a clear LinkedIn page, and that you're using it, tailor your content to maybe fit some of those trusts and foundations that might be on there, some of those business organisations that might be working on there that you can connect with as a charity, that you can connect with as an individual. Invite people along to come and like your page. So I would definitely use LinkedIn. Hi, Bobby, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, that's all really helpful so far. Thanks very much. I've been scribbling down notes. I just wanted to ask you about LinkedIn and whether or not you see funder events being promoted there. And
Yes.
because I mean, it like you say, there are a lot of webinars that we can get involved. We can join and that sort of thing. But I'm seeing less funder events, and that they would be really useful. So I'm just wondering, how often you see them, and what opportunities there are on LinkedIn
definitely.
for that.
The funder events have definitely slowed down a little bit. We seem to be more doing the kind of webinars and the Q&As that are with someone else, like Get Grants and people like that. They're doing Meet the Funder events. So they're always advertised on LinkedIn. But I find if you follow particular trusts and foundations that are on there, they often advertise if they're having them. Eventbrite is another good place to have a look as well. If you can sign up to follow organisations that you're interested in, you can type in what you're looking for. I found a couple of really low-key kind of Meet the Funder events that way. Community foundations often do lots of events through Eventbrite, and that's a good way, and they often then invite other organisations in, and although they might be local, the funder that they invite in might not always be local. They might just be doing some particular kind of soliciting in that local area. So don't always look just in your immediate patch as well. Have a look out and see what else is happening with some of the other community foundations in particular. Do quite a lot of Meet the Funders. Get Grants does as well. Charity Excellence occasionally does some of the funder events, although they're quite at the minute focused on NAI, which is really interesting as well. But I would follow people on LinkedIn, follow trust and grant makers on LinkedIn, and they often advertise if they've got some. But funder events run by themselves are getting less and less. Tesco's used to do them all the time with Groundworks, and they don't seem to have done anything for a while. The lottery posts some really good updates on LinkedIn. Not so much come along to the event, but some really good kind of insights into how things have changed and how things are changing. Same with Children in Need. I've been posting lots of good things on there about the changes that they're looking to make at the minute. So I would definitely use that as another source. I find the Trust Fundraising Hub on Facebook really good as kind of my peer-to-peer tool. It's fantastic for keeping up to date, more so than what funders sometimes put out there. We're more on the ball than funders are sometimes at sharing things and letting everyone know what's going on. So if you're not part of that hub, I would definitely go and join that. And then LinkedIn has become my second kind of to-go place to find out what's happening with funders. And the Greggs Foundation a couple of weeks ago posted about a new pot of money that they had, and that was really good to see. And they were putting it on LinkedIn and using it in that way, and I hadn't seen that anywhere else. That was the first place I saw it. So it's becoming a really useful tool like that. So I'd say just keep your eyes and ears open, follow people that you wouldn't even think about doing, community foundations that might not necessarily be in your patch, but might do some Meet the Funder events with funders that aren't necessarily just in that specific kind of geographical location belonging to the foundation. Have a look on Eventbrite, see what's going on there. If you're not following Get Grants, sign up to things that they're doing, and they do lots of Meet the Funder events. So I would definitely have a look there as well. And are people talking about AI? Are people using AI in trusts and foundations, or is it still something we're all a bit wary of? Is it something that we're looking at how we can utilise? I'm happy to share how I've kind of been using it, if that's helpful for anybody, and how you could potentially use it.
Yeah, I've dabbled, Stacey.
Yeah, dabbled. That's a good start.
But with little success, so yes. But we are talking about it more in our charity, about how we could be using it across different aspects, possibly for targeting better, that sort of thing, targeting better quality donors, and then of course I have used it with my bid writing, but it really depends on the kind of the quality of the information I feed it. So, and then there's the kind of the privacy concerns around, where is it going, because that's sort of commercial information then. So I think like someone has just said in the chat, treating it with caution, I guess, at this still.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Bobby. That's really useful. I would absolutely say use AI with caution. It definitely has its place within trust fundraising, and I think it can be a really good, useful tool for us all to be able to get to use. It's never going to replace how amazing we all are. We have been honing our skill. We know where to look for information. We know how to bring all that information together. We know how to craft a really good case for support that we can then use for our applications. I find AI is a really good way, as Ed has just said, to look at word count. When you've written a piece, and then the word count is super tiny and you need to condense that down, and you're taking bits from your case for support and you need to be able to put that into an answer with a really strict word count. Or sometimes when it really annoying happens that you've written everything out in preparation for your application, you go to paste it in and the word count's slightly different to what they told you when you're preparing everything. It's a really good way of keeping the way that you write and your voice and your tone of voice for your charity, but being able to just distill it down into the word count that they're looking for. It's a real time saver and has rescued me a number of times. But also I think it's a really good way of looking at information and data. Nothing that's kind of going to be identifiable, nothing that is that you wouldn't want to be out there and you wouldn't want anybody else to see. But if you want to compare two sets of data, really anonymized, basic data, it's a really good way to do that. If you want to look at a document and kind of go, can you tell me what's changed? It's a really good way of looking at that. Sometimes I will do a first draft, and you could pop it into AI and say, what is there anything we could improve? Have I missed something? And it's a good way to get those creative juices flowing. And sometimes if you're staring at a blank page, or you've written something and it's taken you ages, and you're like, I'm just at breaking point with this, I need another set of eyes. It's a good way of having something to bounce off at. Like I said, it's never going to replace how amazing we all are, and how good we are at writing and getting that passion and getting that kind of, the project across. We know our projects inside and out. And I hope that when your charity's designing projects, that you're all involved in that from the very beginning. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about. If you are being asked to fund a project, you should be involved in the design of that. We are the bridge between our charity and that potential funder. We know what's going to appeal to a particular funder, and we know how our project might need to be built so it appeals to a particular funder, and how we need to write about that. So AI is never going to take that away from us. We are amazing writers. We absolutely know what we're doing. It's just sometimes we need that second opinion, or we need someone to help us kind of look at the word count for us, or giving a starting sentence, when we're having a really brain block day and we need something. So I would absolutely test it, see how it feels. The more information that you can feed into it, and the more you can show it your style and your charity's tone of voice, the better it will work for you. Make sure that you've got your AI policies in place also as an organisation before you start dabbling too much in it. But I don't think it's something we should be scared of. I think it's something we should absolutely be cautious of and be careful of what we're feeding into it. But I think it can be a really helpful tool, particularly looking at word counts. But we're all amazing writers, so we don't need someone to write for us. We just need someone to help us sometimes when we have a brain block. It was really interesting to see how you're all using it, and with caution, and taking it steady and seeing how it goes. I think sometimes we, again, just the same as we do with the negativity around trust and foundations at the minute, with them closing and pausing and everything. I think sometimes we also get that AI is amazing, and AI, we should use it, and why aren't you using it as your charity, and it can help you do all these kind of things. And although I think that has its place, cautiously, I think for trust fundraisers, we need to see how we can utilise it for what we do when we are ready to do that. There's no reason why we couldn't have a little test and a little play with it and see where we can utilise it. But I think sometimes we feel like we're missing a trick if we're not doing masses of stuff with AI, because everybody seems to be talking about it and talking about how we can use it. I think there are organisations coming up out there that are looking at using AI to kind of find major donors and to find trust and foundations. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work yet, especially because what we do as trust fundraisers, you can I've just realised doing these, I can't think and look at questions coming in at the same time. So if I glance over there, I totally lose my train of thought. But yeah, I think sometimes with AI, we kind of, we feel like we should be utilising it more. And sometimes we just need to pause and see how best we can use that ourselves. So as if you work for a climate, nature, conservation charity, you should stay clear of ChatGPT, as each search uses a vast amount of energy and power. And absolutely, that's another thing to take into consideration as well. Using any kind of kind of AI function takes up a lot of energy and water to cool the power sources down as well. So that's another thing to take into consideration. And actually, I've just been working on a case for support for a charity that uses a lot of tech, and that's something we've had to look at in their environmental policy about the use of AI and the use of the technology that they're using, and the impact that has on the environment, kind of countered with the good that it's doing for the people that technology is supporting, and making sure that we're being proactive in acknowledging that we understand these things can have an impact on the environment, but this is why that we're doing it. So it's that balance, isn't it, all the time, of being able to kind of clearly demonstrate why the decisions we've taken, again, which is why it's really important to have your AI policy in place before you go too far down the line with AI and decide how you're going to use it as an organisation. But I definitely think it's something that we need to think about. Whether it will, I can't imagine that it will ever change the way that we do trusts and foundations. Oh, that's what I was talking about, wasn't I? About organisations that were coming up looking at major donors and trusts and foundations making use of AI. And what I was going to say was, we're also good at being able to prospect and find those charities, trusts and foundations, that match with our priorities, because we know our charities really well. I can't see AI being able to do that as well as we can do it. It might be able to point people in the right direction, but whether it would be able to take the wealth of information that we have as trust fundraisers and know our organisations inside and out and translate that into being able to find prospects, I just can't see how that might work. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Everything's constantly changing, isn't it, in our world? And technology is amazingly adapt and can change so fast. Who knows in another 10, 20 years what AI might be doing and what the trust fundraising landscape looks like for us. Thank you, everyone. That was really interesting to see how you're all using it and how you feel about it. And that's the other thing as well, isn't it? Is how we feel about the use of AI. Like Ed says, with the climate energy usage factor in as well. You know, we have to take some of that on board as well, about our own usage and our own footprint in the world. And that's something we all have to take into consideration as well when we're thinking about AI. Does anybody else have any questions, any thoughts, how we're feeling, any wins that anyone would like to celebrate with us? We're always up for a celebration, or anything that's not going quite as well that we can have a chat through and see how you're all feeling. Feel free to pop any questions that you have. And if you haven't already, and if you do have a LinkedIn profile, feel free to pop that in the chat. Because you never know, we might know and be connected to a trustee that can link you in with a trust that you've always been trying to get in touch with, because funders might be linked as well. So by being linked to us might get you a step closer to a trust or funder that you are after as well. So feel free to pop those in the chat as well. Just checking if there's anything in there, making sure I'm checking both places. When we used to do this on Zoom, we didn't have a Q&A section separately. It was all in the chat. So now I'm just making sure I'm checking in both places. But if no one's got any more questions, I won't hold you for the full hour, because you must be starving, unless you've all been good and eaten before. I can only ever eat afterwards. So I recently invited a foundation in to see our work. They asked me to apply for 30k. If you can invite them in for a VIP experience. Absolutely. Not all trusts and foundations want to be invited in, like to be invited in, and you're not necessarily always going to be near to where a trust or foundation is based. If you're a national organisation and your head office is up in Newcastle and you're after a funder that's in London, it's not always going to be something that's possible. But definitely, if you're doing any major donor events, there's no reason why you can't invite your trusts and foundations, even potential ones that you know you're a really good fit to, that you might like. to go, might like to come along, ask them to come and see, particularly if they've already supported you. Always make sure that you've invited them to come and see the benefits of what they've been able to do, the impact of how they've supported you. In my experience, not lots of trusts and foundations take you up on that. There's still a little bit, as much as things have moved in those building those relationships, if you imagine how many people that they must fund in a year, from 10 to 114 plus, they're not going to be able to go and visit all of those. But there's no reason, absolutely, why you can't use it as part of your stewardship to invite them to come and see what you're doing. Absolutely. Especially if you're already doing an event, there's no reason why you couldn't just pop them an invitation. So Jay says, how can we make a niche health condition stand out in such a competitive trust landscape? So again, I would look at how you're talking about yourself in relationship to a funder's priorities, making sure that you're reflecting their language, that you're using their language in your social media, on your website and in your applications. Good case studies, good stories. If they'll accept videos like the National Lottery does, can you send a little video that contains some of your beneficiaries, if that's possible, to accompany any of your applications, particularly if you're sending them via email. There's no reason why you can't include a little video, and I've seen more and more applications starting to test the waters with that, particularly if the funder does accept applications via email, which again is happening more and more. There's no reason why you couldn't pop a little video case study in with your application to make that stand out a little bit more. Really, it's about telling that story, isn't it? About showing how why you're niche and why you're needed. Your nicheness is your kind of superpower. It's your unique selling point. It's your USP. It's the reason why they should support you in a way, because who else is doing this work? Who else would be able to support these people that really need you? And that's how you need to talk about yourself. Make sure they know that you're niche and that you're using that you're niche, and that you're doing really strong, impactful things with any money that they could give you. Like we all need to do, demonstrate those impacts, make them really, really strong, tell your wonderful case studies, and tell those stories. That's the only real way you're going to make yourself stand out. I think it's acknowledging that you're niche and what they could do with your support, what you could do with their support would make a real big difference in an arena that not a lot of other people are working in, but why you are so needed. I definitely have a look at those video case studies for email applications, and include some of those if you can, to be able to demonstrate and tell your story, and sell those stats about why you're niche. How many other people, there's not many people with the condition because it's really rare, talk about that and talk about the difference that you'll make. Even because it's a small group of numbers doesn't mean the impact isn't as much just because it's a smaller group of numbers. It might be more, because where else would they get that support from? So I definitely lean into the niche if I could, put those stats in there. And absolutely, Amberly's just said compelling case for support should also include what could happen if we're not there. Absolutely. And the other thing is that a case for support should include your sustainability plan. So not just environmental, but also how you might sustain your project beyond any money that you might receive, any grants that you might receive. What's the legacy going to be for your project? Is it that you're going to train up some volunteers to be able to do some of the work if you weren't doing that project anymore, if you couldn't get any more funding for that, but a funded grant has enabled you to train up these volunteers so the project would continue on even if you didn't get any more funding? Funders are starting to want to see that, what would happen if the money wasn't there from them, if they couldn't continue, what would their lasting legacy be, so that they feel like that's not being wasted. And also beneficiaries, making sure that you're using beneficiaries to design your projects, making sure the voice of your beneficiaries is seen in everything that you're doing. Some funders will ask that outright in an application. Some funders will just expect to see that voice and see what you're doing to work with those communities, those beneficiaries, those individuals, how you're making sure they're part of the solution and not just kind of, you're coming in as a knight on a white horse and that you're saving them, that they're actually involved in being able to, be self-sufficient, be helpful to themselves, that you're using their knowledge of whatever problem it is that you're trying to solve to shape how you're going to provide that solution. And that's really important. And those are two kind of, as well as what would happen if we're not here, but also looking at your sustainability outside environmental and looking at how you're using your beneficiaries and making sure those questions are included in your case for support. Also, another thing that's becoming a bit more kind of up and coming in trust is social value. So it's something that businesses are starting to talk about and using it for their corporate social responsibility. And I think we as trust fundraisers should start talking about our social value more too. So what value are we giving outside of just our beneficiaries? So the environmental value, the community value, it could be that we're doing exercise classes for older people. So the social value for that would be that older people might be walking more, so they're not using their cars as much. They're taking more public transport, they're walking more. So the environmental impact is that there's potentially less cars on the road. So have a look at your social value. There's lots of social value calculators out there as well that will help you figure out your social value. Lots of councils have a social value calculator. So have a look at your local council and see if there's one there. But definitely start thinking about your added value, your social value. Like I said, it's something that corporates are starting to use, and there's no reason why that we shouldn't be starting to look at that as well. So those are some new things that I've started adding into my kind of case for support to kind of hit those hot topics, shall we say, that trust funders are looking for, but might not always say it, because you might not always be filling in an application, so there might not be a specific question, but then that might be something that they're looking for in their applications that come through. And if you're already on that and you're already putting out there, it stands you above some of the other applications that they're receiving, makes you stand out. Love the social value side. Fantastic. I'm glad it was helpful. Also a heading that says what makes us distinct, with clear bullet points. Yeah, absolutely. What makes us distinct, what makes us unique, why is the work that we're doing significant, all those good things that go into a case for support. And also I've started putting lots of summaries in, so I will write what the answer to some of those questions in my case for support. Then I might, if it was a long answer, I might do a 500-word summary, a 300-word summary, because when you're getting those applications come through, once you've written it, you can copy and paste that in, because you go, oh, I've got one of those for 500 words, I've got one of those for 300 words, 150 words. So I've started to summarize those in my case for support as well, so I don't have to do the thinking later on. It's all there. It's also really helpful if you're using volunteers to help you write applications, if you have a really good, strong, solid case for support as your basis, or if you have to go off long-term sick for any reason, or you're away on holiday and a big application comes through that needs a really immediate deadline, because we know that's always happened to us. You've left behind a really good case for support that's in the right tone of voice, that will match what a funder is looking for, that you can hand over to somebody and confidently know they'll be able to pull an application together. So it's not all on your shoulders. If you're a lone trust fundraiser, sometimes it can feel like it's just all down to you. So being able to have that really strong case for support and having, set some time aside to make sure you've got one for every project that you need funding for is really, really worthwhile. And you can add to it and refresh it and change it. It's a working document for you to use. Budgets change, project outcomes change, projects change slightly as well. And it helps you make everything consistent. Everything you're putting out there is really, really consistent. You've got everything at your fingertips. You've already harassed your service delivery team, your finance person, your accountant for all the information. It's already in there. You don't have to keep bothering them. You can just get on and do the amazing things that you do. So top tip, make sure you have your case for support. And that it's up to date, and keep updating it. You know, we all change. If I read through something, even that I'd written last week, let alone 10, 15 years ago, I would have a very different writing style now. I sometimes read things back from a month ago and go, well, I wouldn't write that like that now. Our writing styles change, and the way that we'd phrase things change. Maybe some internal things have changed in the organisation as well. You know, like if we've had a rebrand, if we've had a tone of voice change along with that, we might need to go back in and refresh some of those things. So it's an absolute working document. So it's not a one and done kind of thing. But once you've got the basis, you've got your questions in, it's just about going back in and refreshing those things. So yeah, absolutely. Big fan of case for support. If you don't have one, would highly recommend you taking the time to write your case for support. Absolutely. And think about those things like Amberly said, you know, the social value, what would happen if we're not here? What makes us distinct, significant, why are we needed, all those really good things. We've actually got a webinar coming about how to build a case for support. So if you don't have a case for support and you want to learn how to do that, keep your eye on our Tree Fundraising social media and our website. And once it's ready, it will be there for all of you to come along and help you build your case for support from scratch. We have some other webinars. So we've got a prospecting webinar, on-demand webinar that's available at the minute. But just if you're just starting out in Trust and Foundations, it gives you some good tips about where to find and how to approach the right trust funders. We've got a strategy on-demand webinar, and that we're also doing a live session of that on the 5th of June, which is a Thursday at 12 noon. So that's a really good one to come along if you're looking at your trust fundraising strategy and just want some tips and hints about how to form a really good strategy that will last you long term. And then we'll have a relationship, how to build relationships with trust funders and key things to look out for. And we'll do some more work around unsolicited applications, touching on the things that we've talked about today. So there's lots of good things coming up with Tree Fundraising if you're interested. So keep an eye out. But if there's no more questions or nobody's got anything else they want to add, I shall let you go and have your lunch because it's nearly 1 o'clock anyway. We've done really well. It's gone really quick. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. I really hope you found that useful. We've got another Q&A session, a live one like this, on Tuesday, the 24th of June. I try and keep them all to 12 noon so you can never kind of forget when they are. The times are always the same. So I hope you can come along to that one as well. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. It's really lovely to see you. Thank you for your questions and your input, as always. It's really good to get that interaction and nice to see you all so positive and upbeat for May. So take care, everyone. Have a good day. Have a good rest of the week. And hopefully I will see you in June. Take care, everyone. Bye.